Hi, Kayla. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, you want to just give us a little bit of your backstory? Just tell us a little about yourself, and then we will talk about your book.
Well, I'm in the Toronto, Canada area, and I actually, as well as writing, do some work in film. Some years back, I started off as an actress, doing some commercials and small parts, but it's hard to, it's a competitive business, as you might understand. But what I do a lot of these days is either stand-in work or background work. So you'll see me on certain shows like Handmaid's Tale. I was a regular Martha in the beautiful green smock with the headpiece or head wrap. Designated Survivor, a bunch of shows. So I do some stuff in the film world as well.
Okay, what does a stand-in do exactly?
So a stand-in is the person who basically takes the place of the actor while the camera crew is setting up the lighting and setting up how they want the shot to look. So if she's walking down an alley and looking through, let's say, boxes, trying to find clues, while the actress is getting ready, getting the hair done, learning her lines, etc., I will walk through the scene as though I am the actress and do what she would do. And they set up the lights to make sure everything looks perfect. And then she can come in and they can just start shooting.
Oh, okay, so a stand-in is different than an understudy.
Right. A stand-in, we are referred to as second team. We're just like it's a fill-in for the actor as they
Okay,
get everything ready. I
right.
guess that's the best way to describe it.
Okay, no, because I've heard the term before, but I always get confused between that and an understudy, which is actually somebody who would replace the actor if the actor gets sick or something like that, right?
Is that only in theater though? I mean, I know I've heard understudy, but I feel like I've heard it for theater versus film
Well,
TV. But
I think it's primarily used in theater. Yeah, I don't know if they use that terminology or not for TV or film. I'm not sure. I don't know.
yeah, and I'm trying to think of a situation too where an actor might have to be replaced. I'm not really sure how they'd handle it, because things happen, obviously. But I know at least in the soap opera world, they would say the role of, Jack Newman is now being played by, and they would just introduce the new actor. So,
Well, exactly. Yeah. Although some TV shows, a couple of them replaced the lead actor and they just didn't say anything at all. Like,
yeah, you just have to be like, figure it out. Oh,
yeah.
okay, that's so and so now.
I think
Yeah.
the famous one was Bewitched back in the early 70s when,
I remember watching, yeah, I guess
yeah.
because it went on for some time. That's right, they did. It was the woman, the
No,
main,
the
the
husband,
who did they?
Darren.
It was the husband. I
Yeah.
remember there was, you say that, and I remember some sort of switcheroo. At least watching as a kid, kind of thinking, wait a minute, but yeah.
Yeah, all of a sudden in like season, I think it was 7 or 8, there was a new actor playing the husband. And there was a big kind of a debate with the production crew. How are we gonna do this? How are we gonna just switch out? And their answer was just say nothing at all. You know, people understand that this is a show, that these are actors, and it worked. You know, people just
And
accepted it.
there was no backlash.
Not really. I mean, you did have those people who would say, "Oh, I like the first Darren better," or whatever. People had their opinions, but in terms of actually accepting him as being who he was supposed to be, there was no issue. So it was a very smart strategy, I think, for them just not to say anything.
I wonder if it would work the same today, but I don't know.
I don't
You know,
know.
people would get all over social media complaining that they don't like the new person and or whatever, or that they like him better. I don't know. We'd have a little
Yeah.
bit of different discourse today with social media, regardless.
Well, there's too much noise these
Yeah,
days.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So it might not work. You may be right on that one. So you've got a book out called A Second Chance for Love, and I happen to notice on the cover there's 4 authors. Now, how do
Yes.
4 people write one book?
It varies. So in this case, we did write this book together in that the entire scenario for each of the four stories takes place in the same location, and all of the characters are connected. They're all friends, and we have the stories happening consecutively. So each story takes place over a week leading up to Mother's Day. So we have Anna's story, then my story, then I believe Melinda's story, and then Carrie's is the end at the last one. And they all have the same characters, like, but my main characters who fall in love are obviously not the same ones that Anna has, but my characters make an appearance in her story, and her characters make an appearance in my story, even if it's just a few lines here or there. And they're friends who get together at the tipsy table, and they, drink wine every Tuesday night. So those common elements go throughout all of the stories. And for that reason, I found for me, it was a little more, I don't want to say challenging, but I think when I first realized we were doing it that way, it I was not as keen to do it that way. I just thought, I've done anthologies before. You give me a theme, you give me a length, I write my story, you plop it in the book, I'm done. But I actually now like the fact that there are those connections, because, now I get to write about Aunt Trudy, who makes an appearance in another story, and it just kind of builds a bigger sense of community, which I think for the readers is really something that they love.
So this is actually a 4-book series.
Well, it's they're shorter. So the four stories basically make up the length of what would be one novel, 300-page novel.
Oh,
So
I see. Okay.
yeah, yeah, it's not four 300-page each stories. That would be a lot for for one person to pick up. And in which case we would just make it four individual novels. But something kind of shorter, sweet. You can read one story, put it down, pick up the next story. As let's say whoever the reader is, you don't have to necessarily sit and pull an all-nighter. If you want to see what happens, you can read one, then another one. But it isn't, in this case, it's important to read them in order because of how we've connected the stories.
Okay, so basically everybody wrote one section
That's right.
and then it was put together in one book.
Yes.
Okay.
But all of the stories and the characters know each other throughout. So there's the connections. Like in last fall, we did one for Thanksgiving, and as I mentioned, I'm in Canada, but those stories were completely independent of each other. Mine took place in Canada over the Canadian Thanksgiving holiday, and others took place in different locales, and each story had nothing to do with the other one, except that they were all connected by being Thanksgiving related.
How do you keep the character's personality consistent between different authors? Because they might have a different vision of what this character thinks and does and acts like. How do you keep that continuity?
Exactly. That was one of the challenges. So one thing that we did do was, let's say Carrie was writing about my character now. She sent me the scene she was working on and asked me, would Jazzy do this? Does this make sense? Should I tweak this in some way? And then I could say, yeah, Jazzy wouldn't say that, or Jazzy would do this. And that's how we kind of played that. Um, but and I don't know how it's going to be going forward, because we are going to be continuing to write about Sea Glass Bay in another anthology and maybe standalone books. But, I felt it was also best to give the other characters a little space in my story, but not too big of a space. So it wouldn't take away, another reader wouldn't say, wow, this scene with her is so completely off from what I expected this character to do. But again, we did touch base with the other authors to say, does this seem consistent, and for how your character would behave?
I think you'd almost have to, because otherwise the character could be presumed to have like multiple personality disorders.
Exactly. That was my concern to start. But I think at least it's easy enough to fire off an email, or even to fire off the scene that you're writing with those characters and say, hey, does this work or doesn't it? And tweak it accordingly.
Okay. What's the advantage of having 4 people writing this?
That's a good question. And I think because it's the shorter format, it gives the readers at least a little taste of each author in our styles, which has always been something, like I said, because I've done anthologies that were independent of each other, it kind of gave readers like, well, a chance, like, hey, I'm going to discover Kayla, I'm going to discover Anna. So that is still a benefit in this format. But, so we get to keep our kind of individual voice while creating this community. And the reviews we've gotten have stated that we have our own voices that are clear, yet we pull everything together in a way that works well. So I'm glad we pulled it off. That's all I can say.
Well, I was just trying to make a comparison with doing that and say people that write a TV series, for
Yeah.
example.
Hmm.
You've got, oftentimes with a TV show, you've got multiple writers, but they
Yes.
generally all sit around a table together,
Yeah.
and in the end, there's one script. They sort of
Yeah.
all add their little pieces to the script, and then there's one script for that show. But in this case, it seems like you've got like four separate little stories that are sort of all tied together by
Yeah.
common character, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think for the author too, it can mean more exposure. Maybe people who read Anna's books or Melinda's books, they've never picked up a Kayla Perrin novel. So they read now my story in there and they're like, oh, I've never discovered this author before. And then they will hopefully pick up some of my other work.
Okay, so when you're working with the other people, let's say you write a bit, do you have to run it through all of them for approval, or do you just write it out? I mean, is there any kind of an approval process that goes through this, or like who's the boss, basically?
Well, the boss is the editor, and I think
Okay.
she did a fantastic job. When she read all of the stories, she could see where the holes were, where the possible problems were. And as you can probably imagine, because they were consecutive stories, the person with the most work was the final author, because now she had to incorporate all the other elements that might have changed even from what we thought it might have been to start with. And add and change her story accordingly, if that makes sense to you. Now, I'll tell you what happened with me, um, because I was busy. I was going through a bit of I had a bone infection, so I was dealing with that health problem, and I was not there for the full brainstorming. I was there for some of it, and I had thought we were doing consecutive concurrent stories, sorry. I thought we were all doing a concurrent story. So I wrote my story kind of incorporating their characters. Then I found out, oh no, we were doing them con- uh, consecutively
Consecutively.
so that mine would be second. So I had a really great scene that featured like one of the other characters. There was a yacht party for um, Aunt Trudy's 70th birthday, and she's this nosy older lady. And I had a really fun scene that I put into my story where she interjects herself into my character's relationship, trying to, be this matchmaker. And then I had to cut that because they're like, oh, well, this wouldn't have happened then because by the time that story takes place, they're already together. And so it was a little frustrating, but I still was able to make it work. This time, I think we know how we're going to proceed with the next iteration of this. We're all definitely, even brainstorming it right now. But I think it's going to still change as we write, and we've decided that like Anna's going to do the first one. I'll do the second one again, but so I'll read Anna's story so that I make sure that what I come up with incorporates what Anna has, and then the other author has to read our two stories and continue. Does
Okay,
that sound too complicated? It
no,
sounds
not
complicated as I say it.
not complicated, but it sounds tedious.
Yeah, but it wasn't, I think for when I realized that I had to change my story, for a moment I was irritated. I'm like, I don't do this. If you remember group projects in school, I hated them because I did all the work and I really like kind of working independently. But then I realized, you know what? It wasn't going to be that hard to make the changes. I kept the scene sort of like because I had the scene take place on a yacht. I just changed the event and used different characters so that I could still make it work. And I've introduced a new character who now the editor says she'd like to see her have a story in the future. But it's a little tedious, but it's not overwhelming. It's just I think it's the mindset. Like my first reaction was, ugh. And then when I realized what I had to do, I'm like, oh no, this is doable. And because it's a shorter format. If it were a longer format, then it would be a lot of going through and changing threads that could really be much more tedious. But in a shorter format, it was okay to handle.
I still haven't decided yet if I would prefer this or just write a book myself. I'm not
Uh-huh.
a novel writer, but I do write songs. I've been a
Okay.
songwriter for many, many years. And so I'm equating this to being in a band
Yeah.
versus a solo artist, okay? Where in a band, you put something down on the table and everybody's going to take pieces of it and
Yeah.
do this and throw their 2 cents worth in and say, oh, you should change this line or change
Yeah.
this, you know. Whereas a solo artist, you pretty much have complete control over what you're doing.
Yes. I
However,
yeah,
However, there are times when somebody else will see something in a different light than you saw it, and it actually
absolutely.
improved it. That it wouldn't have been improved had you not had that other person for feedback. So,
Exactly.
yeah, okay. Well, I'll have to digest this idea because I've never actually seen four people on one cover of a book before. So that was sort of new.
And I and for that reason, the editor has also created a Bible for the series based on the first anthology we did, so that we know this location here, these characters. So I think moving forward, it might be a little more tedious because now we're going to have to go through the Bible and see all these elements and how they connect. Um, but for the same reason, she wants to keep things consistent. So now we're not changing up the locations and doing all these different things. But we're gonna see. We'll see how it goes. First one so far, so good.
Okay. Well, we do have to wrap this up. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. And my website is authorkaylaperrin.com. And you can, once you go there, you can find links to find me other places. But I'm also on Twitter at Kayla Perrin. I'm on Instagram at author Kayla Perrin. I've got a Facebook page. Look me up and just put in my name, Kayla Perrin, and I'll pop up.
Okay, great. Well, Kayla, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was nice meeting you, nice talking to you. Again, your book
Well,
is called A Second Chance for Love. Is it out yet?
it is out. It came out last Tuesday.
Oh,
So
great.
it's now released, available for purchase everywhere.
Are you getting any good reviews or any reviews at all at this point?
Yeah,
No?
the reviews have been really good. Like they've been all excellent reviews. And again, through the reviews, I'm seeing the benefit of like the connecting this of the community, and people really found that we did a good job with our own stories, but bringing everything together. And short and sweet, I guess, is what it is, and for each author. But the reviews have been fantastic. I'm really happy.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks again